Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you try it out with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks and exclusives along the way, join us as a paid subscriber. Now, onto this week's adventure.
Do it.
Dave Rabin, welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod. We are very happy to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
My name is Jeff. This is my co-host, Tasha Schumann.
Hey.
So I went to, where were we? We were at the Eudaimonia conference in Florida, West Palm Beach, a rather surreal weekend that I was giving a talk at. And I went to one of your talks on psychedelics, and I was very interested in this talk. It was very thoughtful. It was quite entertaining. And it wasn't just about psychedelics, because you have a much broader interest in mental health more generally and exploring different kinds of interventions and modalities. So I asked if you would come on the podcast. You agreed, and here we are.
Yay.
We did it.
Introduce yourself to our listeners. I know you, but they don't know you. A little bit about your background and what you're all about.
Sure. Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I am a bit unusual as a clinician researcher. I'm a board certified psychiatrist and neuroscientist. I specialize in addiction and trauma research. I run a clinic that trains clinicians in how to do sort of the most advanced, innovative forms of psychotherapy that include the use of psychedelics like ketamine and also include the use of plant medicines and technology. Because during the last 15 years or so, we've seen in mental health, and particularly the treatment of trauma and addictions, that our Western treatments just haven't been working that well. And so I've been spending 20 years plus studying chronic stress and the way that we deal with chronic stress and how that shifts the way we make meaning of the world and what tools we can use that actually do make a dent in our chronic stress burden, which has a direct impact on our health. And what's really interesting and has interested me for a long time is that the best techniques we use to manage mental health conditions and chronic stress that are sustainable are actually the same techniques that have been taught for thousands of years in Eastern and tribal traditions like breathing, meditation, mindfulness, yoga. And it's really the modernization of those techniques, like in the form of biofeedback, neurofeedback, Apollo, that we'll play with today, that really start to make a dent in the way that people recover and change the prognosis of folks who have what they're told have chronic lifelong mental illness. And so I started studying chronic stress, the safety pathway, and trauma being learned fear. How do you treat trauma? Well, you have to treat learned fear with relearning safety. And then psychedelic medicine came to my attention in 2012 through about 10 really outstanding publications in peer-reviewed journals around the world that were demonstrating this incredible potential of psychedelic medicine to accelerate or catalyze the outcomes of psychotherapy and to help people access these quiet mind meditative states for, anywhere from like 2 to 6 hours in a very highly directed way that had these treatment outcomes for PTSD and depression that we had never seen before in the history of psychiatry. And so that took me through and got me to where I am today.
Well, super fascinating, and already there's a ton of things to unpack. So you got interested in how to address initially, you're just talking about stress, like chronic stress response. And then as you began to look into it, you got more interested in what was underneath that, which was not just the stress, but the trauma, the PTSD, the learned fear response. And then you're saying that more even than that, these technologies and the psychedelics also address this third tier of a kind of chronic mental health conditions that are traditionally really hard to address, like chronic depression, anxiety. Is that a fair kind of encapsulation there?
Yeah, and I think the only nuance to that is that it was actually my work with patients, with veterans and traumatized women and children in the clinic that helped me to understand that it was trauma that was often at the root of the mental health challenges they were facing, that they were not able to easily recover from, and that medications alone, which was our kind of, even today, it's currently considered the gold standard of treatment for these conditions, they miss the mark in most cases. Not all cases, some people do benefit from medications, don't get me wrong, but the typical medications we use miss the mark for most people with these illnesses because they're just numbing people to their symptoms rather than getting them to the root source of the issue, which is unresolved, unprocessed trauma. And if you have unresolved, unprocessed trauma and you're taking a medication to make your symptoms better, you're not actually treating the trauma. You're just numbing or distracting somebody from it. And so how do we extinguish that long term? Well, it's actually feeling safe enough to dive in and reevaluate how trauma changes the way we see ourselves in the world as a victim versus somebody who's in charge, for instance, right?
Well, let's go there. And just interesting, like I know a lot of trauma therapists who would actually argue that most chronic mental health conditions, including some of them would say certain cases of bipolar, schizophrenia, not just these, chronic anxiety and depression, and that these all have trauma as their root. And so that's what you're basically finding.
I would tend to agree with that. I think the modern neuroscience evidence and the evidence that's coming out of the massive data projects coming out of the NIMH, the National Institutes of Mental Health, would now validate that hypothesis that unprocessed trauma is at the root of most mental illnesses.
Like pause, which is fucking wild. I mean, to make this claim, that would have been science fiction 5 years ago to even say that. I don't think it's been quite accepted by mainstream psychiatry, but I happen to think it's true. So for you, safety is a central piece in this. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of it comes down to the mind-body connection. And we are really behind in Western medicine with respect to like chronic illness and certain basic understandings of how the body and the brain work. We know a lot about what's going on, but we haven't like fully integrated our Western medicine approach with the Eastern and tribal approaches. And I think if you look closely enough, it's very clear that neuroscience shows that the mind and the body are connected, invariably, irrevocably connected. Like, meaning like if you experience emotional or mental stress for an extended period of time and you don't deal with it, you will get physically ill. And if you are physically ill for an extended period of time and start out mentally and emotionally well, you can get mentally and emotionally ill, right? And stress makes most symptoms and most physical illnesses worse. Like pain is a perfect example. And so, can we really separate the mind and the body? And the answer is no. So if we can accept the modern understanding that, for instance, the mind and the body are connected, then we also can then accept that when you experience an extremely scary event that you don't get adequate support for afterwards, or worst case, you get blamed for afterwards, then that has a biological impact on your body and the way your body works, and not just the way you see yourself as a victim versus an agent of change, but actually the way your body stores fear memory, and not just in your brain. And we've seen this modeled in animals probably for like 100 years, but in humans, those lines were never connected fully. And so now we know that trauma is fear learning, and PTSD, depression, anxiety, these are the outcomes of unprocessed trauma causing fear learning over time. And so in animal models, and we're a lot more like the animals than we think, and Eric Kandel actually won the Nobel Prize for this in 2000. But ultimately, if we understand how similar we are to animals, then in animals, to extinguish fear learning, you have to retrain safety learning. Safety learning is comfort, soothing sensations, everything to do with not reminding the body that you're not under survival threat right now. And when you do that, basically you turn off the fight or flight nervous system, and then you turn on the vagus nerve system. And the vagus nerve is the primary nerve that governs the parasympathetic, what we call the rest and digest recovery nervous system, that governs everything from digestion, reproduction, immunity, metabolism, sleep, emotional regulation, empathy, everything that we want to be active when we're not actively running from a lion. And if you're going to fix trauma, which is fear learning, we have to relearn safety, and we have to retrain the nervous system to remember what safety, not just the concept, but what does safety feel like? What does it feel like in my body? What does it feel like in my mind, in my soul, if you're willing to accept that that word is real? And then where do we go from there?
There's something that you're pointing to that I want to make explicit, and I think is super important, because sometimes we talk about trauma as this threshold thing that can be observed from outside. It's like what you went through is trauma, it's traumatic. What you went through is like sub-traumatic or something like that, right? But what you're talking really about is the first person experience of an event being Traumatic being, it throws me off my sense of safety, makes me feel like I am no longer safe. I internalize that. I make it part of how I approach the world, which means that something that does not look traumatic on the outside, by our standards, can be completely dysregulating for a lifetime for somebody, right? And
Absolutely.
it's so important because, like a lot of the studies that we're talking about and stuff are done on clinical populations, like people who are observably traumatized or stressed out.
Symptomatic.
Symptomatic, yeah. But it's so applicable on a subclinical level
Trauma
as
of everyday
well.
life.
Trauma of everyday life, of being a human being, of surviving in the world.
Yeah, and different populations, as we know, are much more likely to experience trauma on a regular basis than others. Like women of color, for instance, are much more likely to experience trauma on a daily basis because of the way people treat them differently than white men.
Yes, and also to have that trauma then questioned and minimized and
Exactly, which then is concreting the trauma rather than acknowledging it. And the acknowledgement of, hey, this might have hurt you or this could have hurt you is actually the support that people need to let them know, hey, I'm here for you, rather than why did you let that happen to you, right? And it's simply that kind of response that can be the difference between somebody who has, you're probably familiar with Gabor Mate's work. Whether you agree with everything he talks about or not doesn't really matter. But one thing that he talks about that's really important and true is this idea that trauma is not, in fact, the event that happened. It's the response of the body to the event that happened, the memory that's stored in the body afterwards. So what someone as a child might have experienced as being picked on in school, and they don't see that as having changed their sense of self, might not be a traumatic event to them, whereas to somebody else, they might start seeing themselves as less than everybody else and not worthy of love because they were picked on in school at a vulnerable age. And so that is in fact a trauma, but it's not the event, it's the response of the body to the event.
mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about then what we do about it. I guess my big picture question about that is it like there's only so much real estate and you can fill it with fear or fill it with safety? And so the job is just to fill with safety, 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 and that just edges out the fear? Or do you have to discharge the fear to make room for the safety? How do you think about that?
That's a great question. I've never actually had anybody ask me that question quite that way before. That's a really good one.
I've never thought of it that way either.
I just made it up.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to think about it for people, practically speaking. I think so. Another common misconception about what it means to be human is that attention, our ability to pay attention to anything, is a finite resource. And your attention resource is what you're choosing to allow into your body, into your awareness. What is allowed into your awareness becomes part of your consciousness. And what becomes part of your consciousness becomes part of you. So if I choose in any moment, in any given moment, starting with right now, we have the choice. Whether you acknowledge it or not, we have the choice, biologically speaking, to choose to focus on anything from fear to safety or fear to love and everything in between, however you want to think about safety. And so if you choose to focus on things in the past that made you afraid, guess what? You will feel afraid right now, even though those things aren't here. And then you will project that fear into the future, which will make you feel more unsafe in the future and not even just now. So to your point, I think it's actually both, because you have to acknowledge the fact that you have the choice to choose what you attend to. And that's the cognitive switch. If you are a victim, you don't have the choice, right? If you identify as a victim of circumstance, you've already given up your choice. And so the cognitive switch is to understand biologically, we always have the choice. But if we know we have the choice, then it doesn't matter what happened in the past per se, because we can't change the past, but we can change what we're doing right now. And what we do right now has to do with acknowledging the choice of where is my attention right now. And if I focus on, hey, yeah, maybe all this stuff in the past did happen that was scary, but right now I'm safe. And then you start to pay attention to the things that remind you of safety and feeling in control, which go hand in hand, which are like your breath, being able to control your attention itself, practices of gratitude, practices of forgiveness, self-love, self-compassion, soothing touch, soothing music, things like soothing sensations around you. All of those techniques allow you to remember that you can control your attention and direct it to the thing that reminds you that you're actually safe in the moment. And the past is not controlling you. Does that make sense?
It's like bricks and mortar enlightenment, basically. It's like safety by safety. You're building it up to eventually create that confidence in the system, as opposed to a more dramatic kind of spiritual reorientation where you suddenly see there was no one here in the first place that had anything to be unsafe about, but that's not as achievable, although it can happen in this kind of Satori style in psychedelics.
I think even more simply, what you're talking about here is like the training phase where it's like effortful. There's your limited attention and you're reorienting yourself by inserting moments of safety or reminding yourself of safety, which you don't have to do all the time. Ideally, you'd get to a point where that comes more naturally. It's like the space of your attention becomes safety. You have trained yourself. It's like having like a secure attachment as a child or something. You're not holding that in your awareness. It's like the entire environment of your attention.
It's the new water you live in.
Yeah. But that training phase is really important. And that's like the basis of practice. That's what we're always talking about, right? It's like what you're inserting into this moment.
Yeah. And that's what Eric Kandel actually won the Nobel Prize for, which is a core of a lot of the teachings. But Eric spent his whole life as one of the most famous Holocaust survivors and neuropsychiatrists figuring out how fear and safety learning work. And basically, like if I was to summarize what he discovered and won the Nobel Prize for, he discovered the same thing that our moms have been telling us our whole lives, which is that practice makes perfect or practice makes mastery. And it doesn't matter what you practice, you have to practice intentionally what you want to get out of your life and what you want to get better at. And if you practice doing something you don't want to get better at, then you're still going to get better at that to your great dismay.
Exactly. Most of us are practicing things that we don't actually want to get better at. That's what I say. It's like most of the time we're meditating. We're just meditating on something that is really bad for us.
Right. Like a rumination or negative intrusive thoughts. Yeah.
Fear about the future. All right. So tell us about Apollo, and we're going to do a little a practice experiment with everyone listening right now, where you're going to get a chance to experience a bit of 2 minutes worth of safety.
So Apollo is a technology that came out of this research that I was doing into safety learning. And I was working at the University of Pittsburgh in the Department of Psychiatry, seeing that drugs were not working for most of these folks. We were trying to figure out, well, can we tap into a more non-drug based solution that technology can support? Because while deep breathing and meditation and yoga work, if you ask someone who has PTSD to meditate and they don't have a lot of like expertise or practice in that up front, that actually doesn't make them feel safe, because guess what? As soon as you quiet your mind, all these traumatic memories come up, right? And it's kind of setting them up for failure. So what we were trying to figure out was, we know somatic techniques work. And by somatic techniques, I mean kind of centering your mind back into your body, soothing sensations in the body, soothing touch, hugs, your favorite song, snuggling a pet, whatever that might be, is extremely effective in animals and humans at almost instantaneously calming the body, boosting vagus nerve activity, and then quieting the mind in a nice way, like a comfortable way. And so what we figured out during that time frame in the lab, working with veterans and folks with trauma and healthy people, is that if you can send the right signal to the body, then the body feels it, knows it, and is like, oh, this feels nice, so I can allow myself, it's a reminder of what it feels like to be safe in my body. Basically the effect of like when you're having a really bad day, and that we've all probably experienced having a really bad day, and then one of your favorite songs comes on by chance, or somebody you like gives you a hug or holds your hand, and you instantly feel better. There is a neurological pathway that's being activated that results in that almost instantly feeling better state transition. But we've never really understood it until recently. And so Apollo uses sound waves that are very gentle, barely audible, if not completely silent sound waves that you send to your physical body through your phone or through wearable. We're going to use the phone today, that remind the body of that safety feeling.
I mean, do you have to kind of consciously notice that you're feeling more settled for it to be helpful, or is it just teaching the nervous system to feel safer and you can just be daydreaming about something else?
Yeah, it's actually the latter, which is really interesting. So you don't need to, all you need to do when you're experiencing it, and anybody who's listening, by the way, can experience this on an iPhone near you. If you just go to hugvibes.com, you can download the app and try and experience Apollo for free along with us. But yeah, you don't need to.
We'll put a link in the show notes so people can just click a link and it'll literally pop up on their phone, right?
Yeah, once you download the app, it'll just pop up the right vibe for you. Yeah, and so basically the reason why this was such a phenomenal discovery was because we used to think that we had to teach people what we call top down. I have to explain to you what to do cognitively. You have to understand it, then you have to put it into practice, which was always the way that these breathing and meditation and mindfulness techniques have been taught traditionally. And that does work, but about at least 50% of people don't follow instructions correctly on a regular basis, right? And so it takes time and effort, a lot of effort, sometimes thousands of hours to master these kinds of techniques to the point where you feel like you can easily access those states of calm, safety, recovery just with your breath or just with your mindful practice. And what's interesting is there's another way to learn. And the other way to learn that every human on the face of the earth was born with is called bottom-up learning. So that means body to brain. And body to brain means you learn through experience of a feeling. It's also called experiential learning. So it's like, I feel different. And then when I am centered in that feeling in my body, I can remember that feeling. And then my body is actually reminding my brain that I'm safe, not my brain telling my body that's already in a fear state, oh, you can calm down. That actually works so, as many of us know.
Yeah, and it's a very Western kind of way of thinking, that we have to go from concepts into experience. But, from when we're pre-verbal, all of the learning we're doing essentially is bottom up. It's like tactile senses. It's through watching and learning.
Yeah, you nailed it. And that's actually part of how we kind of came to this is if you look at humans, going back to the origins of humans and then going back to the origins of mammals, over like millions of years of evolution, the earliest mammals, first thing they do when their newborn pops out is they touch their newborn or they nurse their newborn. And that connection, the physical connection, is a non-verbal, no language required communication that's an instantaneous communication of safety to the newborn that really needs it in that moment, because prior to that, they were touched 360 4D, right? Like in the womb, they were completely surrounded by soothing sensations. All of a sudden now they have to breathe on their own, they have to eat on their own, they have to shit on their own, and everything is like, there's no more. Yeah, it's terrifying. It's not surround sound anymore, right? It's like going into the real world on your own. And so it is that nonverbal communication of safety through touch that still exists today that we use for all of our children when they're born. But what's interesting is as adult humans, we forget that we still need it, right? Like we forget that that is still critical. And my wife likes to say, like, we're all like big babies because we just forget that we have the same needs as babies, which we still do.
Dr. Davies, take me back to the safe place. This is stressing me out. I want to go to vibration.
I honestly feel like so much argumentativeness between people or like strife is really just people's nervous system asking for a hug. It's like, like the amount of times where like I'm like, I don't know what I need right now. Like my fiance is trying to help me, and I'm like, wait, actually, let's try something. Can you just like hug me or
my wife is always telling me.
Yeah, I'm like, and it solves 99% of my problems. I will say that for
absolutely.
When my youngest son's favorite book is called Hug. It's this it's this chimp that walks around trying to. He misses his mama. He wants a hug, and he's seeing all the other animals hugging them, and then finally he gets these big hugs at the end.
Hug.
Oh, that's cute. Well, so I'm gonna walk you all through a little bit of meditation that is a bottom-up learning experience of meditation, targeting your body and then to your brain, that is designed to remind the body that it's safe. This was highly influenced by our research into psychedelic medicines because psychedelic medicines are chemicals that enhance neural pathways around safety. So this is a physical sound wave frequency sensation that also enhances the same neural pathways around safety as psychedelic medicines through the limbic system that tell your amygdala, that fear center in your brain that might be taught to fire off a little too often. Hey, you're safe enough to be able to recover and be present in the moment right now. So this is a 2-minute meditation. So everybody can open their Apollo app or just click the link, hugvibes.life. or go to the hugvibe.com if you don't have the Apollo app yet. If you open it up, it'll open up right to this on an iPhone near you. If you open the app, you hit play.
And if they don't have the app for whatever reason, you're going to do a kind of
Yeah, I'll walk you through. But if you have the app, open it up, press play. When you feel your phone start to vibrate, just hold it to your center of your chest flat. You can put it on airplane mode or do not disturb if you like.
What intensity should we have it on? Mine's currently 50.
Whatever is comfortable for you. As long as you can feel it, that's all that matters.
I put it at 50% intensity.
72.
Yeah. That's good. As long as you can feel it. And so if you close your eyes and just first start out by just noticing the vibration and notice that it comes and goes in a wave. And it's a nice slow wave that kind of fades up and down. You don't need to do anything else other than just notice. And notice that wave and what that reminds you of. Maybe it's a cat purring on your chest. Maybe it's an ocean wave. Maybe it's getting a hug from a friend. And then as you start to notice what that wave reminds you of, start to breathe in as through your nose or mouth as you feel the wave go up, and then breathe out through your nose or mouth as you feel the wave go down. And then just sit with that and breathe. This is about 5 seconds inhale, and then about 5 seconds exhale. And if you're feeling the vibration, you don't need to count. You can just time with the vibration. If you're not feeling the vibration, just 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And then with each breath, as you start to now just paying attention to your breath, the feeling of the air. Just notice the feeling of the air coming in and filling your nose and your windpipes and your lungs, and then emptying. And just with each breath, as you notice the air, just take a moment to acknowledge the air, and with gratitude for supporting us. It's like our fundamental life force. It's our fundamental connection to the world around us. Without it, we can only survive for a few moments, maybe a few minutes. You're really good. And just inhale gratitude. Then exhale negativity. With each inhale, inhale gratitude, starting with the air for supporting us, for keeping us alive, for connecting us to the world. And then exhale something you want to get rid of. Shame, guilt, any kind of thing that it's not serving you. And just sit with that vibration and your breath for a few moments. And if your vibe stopped, you can restart them if you like. But the main idea of this is just to notice that you are in control of your breath. And that when you take control of your breath, you take control of pretty much everything else. And you can direct in this moment where your attention is. And when you notice that you can direct where your attention is, then you've taken control or sovereignty over your consciousness. You've taken control over the gateway to yourself. And then you control what comes in. You bring gratitude in. You invite gratitude in. You exhale. You remove uncertainty, fear, negativity. You can prevent or disinvite things that aren't serving you that you may have invited in the past. And safety and control are synonymous, because the number one trigger of feeling unsafe or afraid is feeling out of control with uncertainty. And so this is an opportunity, as a very basic breathing technique, to just remember what it feels like to be certainly in control of your attention, just in this moment. And so we can sit with this for another 30 seconds or so. Just inhale gratitude, exhale things that aren't serving you, for a few breaths. And then when you're ready, just gently open your eyes. Come back in.
I forgot to mention before, for anyone who's listening, we're putting the phones on our chest. So if you can see the phones were on our chest and they were vibrating. One thing that my 2 minutes ended, and I kind of just sat for like the last minute or so, and I could still feel the like residual vibes. It's like the kind of sustains itself for a while afterwards. And I like that you mentioned the cat thing. It's really quite similar to when my cat sits on me and purrs, and they have this way of doing it right when I need it. Like, I think anyone who has a cat knows this, that they're very intuitive beings. But if you're stressed out and you're laying down, your cat will come and lay on your chest and do exactly what the phone just did, which is like very soothing. But more than soothing, it's like it's grounding, and it is, I think the best word for it is kind of safety.
I feel like my nervous system has to first remember this is not a text message coming in, which is the opposite of feeling safe. It's like, this kind of like high alert thing, because that's what I've trained my nervous system to notice, the vibration.
And that's what your phone has trained you.
Yeah.
My phone has trained me. Absolutely. I have to learn the new training my phone is trying to take care of me. But when I kind of let that go, it's true. The rhythmicity, and I think it's particularly the breath, just being connected to the breath, it's a key to shifting anyone's state. So there's a couple things I want to ask about. So what do you see with people who do this over time? This is not just doing it once or twice during the day. I mean, you recommend what is your protocol? How often do you encourage people to try something like this, if not with your app, with some other version of the breath or vibration? And how long, what are we looking at in terms of actually beginning to see the substantial change?
I mean, so in the moment, in our clinical trials, just feeling this for 2 minutes is enough to boost vagus nerve activity and to boost heart rate variability statistically significantly. So that's how long it takes to see a significant change in your physiology. And for most people to notice, hey, like my shoulders are a little bit lower, or my voice is a little slower and lower toned, or my thoughts are a little more quiet, that in the real world, we really need this a lot more often. And you can do it. You don't need the technology to get there. Like if we just breathe at this 6 breaths per minute, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or slower rate, we'll get there on our own. But again, that takes a lot of practice. And so, when we see people get the best results with this, it's doing it at least like 20 to 30 minutes a day of either having your phone on your chest or on another part of your body or on your yoga mat next to you or on your mattress. And then we also have the wearable that I was wearing earlier that gives you that around the clock. And so we built this to give people the opportunity to passively deliver these vibrations to them. So you don't have to say, I'm going to take my phone and hold it to my body now and see what happens. You could actually wear that feeling. And what's really interesting when we track people over now, we have studies of people following them for 3 years wearing this thing and track them with Oura Ring and other biometric trackers. And what's interesting is that within 21 days of wearing this for 3 hours a day, with that same rhythm that you just felt or a similar rhythm, people get 30 to 60 more minutes of sleep a night, because your body is so much calmer and safer that you allow yourself to enter the vulnerable state of sleep, which, when you really think about it, is the most physically vulnerable state we ever enter into our entire lives. When deep in REM sleep, we're basically paralyzed. So we can't defend ourselves. So you have to feel safe to be able to allow yourself to enter those critical recovery sleep stages. So yeah, somewhere between, I say for the phone, it's like 20 to 30 minutes, but the more the better. And for the wearable, we see a pretty nice sweet spot around 3-4 hours a day that really starts to get those clinically significant outcomes for people.
Well, I noticed, you put a big emphasis on control, and I was thinking about the kind of paradox of control when I was doing it. I like your point that to know we're in control makes us feel safe, and a lot of people never get that message or never get that experience. So that's really important to learn that. On the other hand, I'm thinking about that famous, I think it's Schopenhauer quote, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. That the onus to be in control in the midst of all of this, well, what is essentially out of control, the changiness of life, actually can be very stressful, can create a lot of anxiety. And as a meditation teacher, I work a lot with people who, when I encourage them to actually let go of the need to continually control, to relax, to trust that they're held without, that's where they get these big shifts. So I wonder if you comment on that.
Yeah, it's a great paradox. And I think that is like really quintessential, like it's fundamental to the understanding of what we're talking about, which is that we don't in fact have control over most things. And so what safety is reminding ourselves of the things that we have control over right now. And there's not that many things that we have control over right now. So that limited list of things is really the anchor points or touch points that allow you to come back to center. So for instance, we can't control the past. The past is the past. It's changed. It is as it is, right? There's no revision. Like you can revise your memories of it, but what happened. And similarly, you can't control the future because the future is yet to be. So what we can control is what we can do right now, which I like to call the 6 or 7 elements of control. And these are your attention, which I would call like the meditation mindfulness, where your attention is at any moment, your breath, your physical movement, what you're listening to, touch, whether you touch yourself or whether somebody else, you exchange soothing touch with somebody else consensually or a pet, and then things like nutrition and sleep, what you choose to put into your body and when you choose to rest. And there are very few situations in our entire lives where we're not able to control those things at any moment about ourselves. So if we think about those being like the 7 elements of what we can control, then everything else we can't control. And we're okay with that because we know that's the case. And so all it takes is redirecting your attention to what you can control. All of a sudden you feel in control and you feel safe because you've reminded yourself that you're safe right now. Because if you were actually running from a lion, your body wouldn't let you focus on anything other than getting out of that situation. You wouldn't be able to take some deep breaths and pause and meditate or sing a song, right? You would be running from that lion.
It's interesting because another thing you can control a little bit is surrender, is equanimity, is letting go of control. So that's this hilarious thing. Like you can really notice the shift between like really tightly holding on versus like breathing out and letting things be as they are. That acceptance of the moment is something that's under your control, paradoxically.
Absolutely.
Well, and they're kind of reciprocal as well. It's like if you're coming from like a hypervigilant state of trauma, then the first step is like get a taste of what safety feels like. And from that little taste of safety, your sense of what you need to be in control of loosens. You know, suddenly I don't have to be like quite so OCD about my environment or my relationships or my past or my future. And then you're moving kind of back and forth. It's like one foot in the other, learning a little bit about safety, relinquishing a little bit of what you thought control needs to be. You know, they're kind of like, you have to start somewhere. It's like kind of chicken and an egg. You have to have a taste of what it means to be safe. For some people, that comes at childbirth. You know, sometimes you do feel safe by your parents. Many of us do not, right? So it's just kind of like, how can you just slip in that little taste of safety, you know, and if it's through an app or a wearable, or if it's like
or a psychedelic journey.
So yeah, exactly. But I also, what this reminds me of is, you know, in my meditation lineage or many meditation lineages, there is chanting practices, right? Or like mantra practices. And in the Tibetan lineage, where they, you know, you often sing like Om Mani Padme Hum, and you'll do it at this like Om Mani Padme Hum, which resonates right there, vibrates right there, exactly where I just have my phone sitting. It feels exactly like that. And mothers very often will put their children to bed by singing them Om Mani Padme Hum, you know, and it's just so like,
or just vibrating.
Just vibrating, yeah, or like humming to yourself, right? It's so, even I think a lot of people think that they're like, that's corny. I'm not going to do that. 'Cause, and so maybe it's like, okay, try it with an app, try it with a wearable until you feel it. And then you can kind of expand that. Like maybe you do want to just start humming to yourself more often at your desk while you're working or, something.
Right. Yeah. And I think to your point, one of the other things that people notice that the Apollo vibrations in your chest feel like, as you said, is it reminds them of chanting Om, right? Because it's this slow up and down wave. And whether you're humming or you're chanting Om or you're doing some other kind of like mantra based chanting or singing, if you try that for like just a couple times, it is really freaking hard to ruminate negative intrusive thoughts when you're humming.
Yeah.
Right? Or chanting. It's really hard. And that's another element of control that we talk about. Like that's a natural way to understand how you can take control over your attention in any moment and where your mind is focused. And it's interesting because our minds can be literally anywhere. They can be in the past, they can be in the future, they can be right here, right now, they can be in some foreign galaxy or in somebody else's mind, right? There's all these different places our minds can be, but our bodies are always here now. They're not going anywhere, right? So as soon as we remind ourselves that our bodies are safe places for us, then we center our minds back into our bodies, or our minds feel comfortable to come back centered into our bodies. And this is how psychedelic therapy works as well. And it helps people to remember that the body is a safe place for us. And when the body's a safe place, all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, I'm not under threat right now. Right? Like the past where I was a few moments ago is not here. My body is here. My body's safe and I'm safe. And then it's almost a subconscious experience more than a conscious experience, but it translates into over time through practice, something that you're very acutely aware of and in control of.
Yeah, it's teaching your nervous system, not your conscious mind as much. And that's where it makes all the difference. And well, you've been awesome and it's really fun. And we should almost get you on again and maybe just high level. I mean, you already kind of mentioned it, and it can bring you into a particular experience of safety, but how do psychedelics fit into this model of treatment that you're part of pioneering, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so we should definitely do this again. It was really fun. And psychedelics are a really, really complicated topic in this way because they are not all soothing. There's a lot of people who have described psychedelics in very interesting ways. Language is very important, by the way. The term psychedelic is a very important word to understand. It was coined by Aldous Huxley and Humphrey Osmond in like 1950 or something. And what it means is to reveal the mind. Delos means mind, psyche means mind, Delos means to show or to reveal. And so what we're really talking about is like looking under the hood of your awareness to what's beneath the surface of what you're typically noticing. And that could be anything. And then there's the non-specific amplifier of awareness, which is what Dr. Stan Grof coined, right? Which is this idea of when you take a psychedelic medicine, regardless of what it is, like if it's THC or if it's psilocybin or if it's LSD or ayahuasca or whatever, what the medicine is doing is it's amplifying your awareness of what is beneath the surface and what you brought in to that experience. And so if you bring in fear, uncertainty, and you're in surroundings where you don't feel safe because the people around you don't trust when you take the medicine, guess what? You're going to amplify fear and uncertainty, and you can actually re-traumatize yourself. And we see this all the time. And I'm one of the few psychiatrists and nationwide that does bad trip therapy for people, and it's a huge part of my practice. And then there's the opposite, which is what we do in the therapeutic setting, where we spend several sessions usually cultivating a relationship built on trust and non-judgment and acceptance and love and connection, so that when that person takes the medicine, that is what gets amplified. And that facilitates people feeling safe enough to remake meaning around past traumatic events.
Right. I love that. But the problem is, like, many times I've gone into a psychedelic experience where I have felt very safe. I've been in a good place. This is sort of years ago when I was more in my, I was doing a lot of that, but it was a good container. I was in a great place. I knew the facilitator. I knew the people who were with me, and I go into the trip and it starts out great, but then something happens. Something is made manifest through your experience, a memory, a trigger, a movement within the psychedelic, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you're in some kind of terrified, out of control state. And that can happen on the regular. Or no matter how much due diligence you do to creating the right setting and container, it's like almost guaranteed to still happen at some point.
Well, that's the under the enough, right? There's no guaranteeing what you're going to find over there.
Yeah, well, because everything lives under the hood.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Like our consciousness is, if you look at the tribal and Eastern traditions of how they look at consciousness, what's under the hood is everything. It's like the iceberg metaphor. Like we're just aware of the tip of the iceberg that's sticking out the top. But if you don't recognize that there's 100 million more times iceberg underneath the surface, then you're going to crash like the Titanic and sink a horrible death. Right.
I mean, it brings us back to our conversation about safety and control, right? It's like there's no better way to learn how little control you have over your mind or what you think you can think about than doing a psychedelic. 5 minutes in, you're like, I am not in control.
That's what I love about it. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna.
But then we're talking about this like, reciprocal relationship between safety and control. It's like I've had so many trips where I was like, I am not in control here. I am being shown my ass in all sorts of ways. I had no idea this was under the hood. But then it's like, can you reach for a sense of safety somehow that's not grounded in control? And then suddenly it's not so important to be in control. You can like tether yourself to some kind of sense of safety. For me, it's like, as a meditator, it's like the thread of awareness, this sense of being right here, right now, and being able to be aware. I'm like, that's, at the very least, that's my sense of safety. I am here, I am conscious, maybe I don't know what it's going to show me, all sorts of stuff is coming up, but it's like, it's that reciprocal relationship again, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Until the you disappears, right? Then you're in a real situation. But so that, to that point, that's why we developed technologies like Apollo, which are now being fully used within the psychedelic space to help people who don't have these techniques mastered around awareness and surrender. Like you were saying earlier, Jeff, like that surrender concept is so important because you do have control over it. So when we do our sessions in advance to prepare people for these transformative healing experiences with psychedelics, a big focus is that they go in knowing that part of their intention is to surrender to the experience, using gratitude as a guide for what the medicine will show them today. Not that they will have any control or even want to have any control over what the medicine will show them, but that the whole point is to surrender, to allow the medicine to show you what you were meant to experience, because what you were meant to experience when you allow the experience to unfold as it will is actually what brings up the vulnerability that needs to be healed. And so to your point, that surrender is critical. And that's kind of how we prepare people for those experiences.
That's beautifully said. And I'll also say that I feel like even those experiences of fear and overwhelm within a psychedelic experience, they have a kind of strange sort of silver lining, which is that you get humbled.
Yeah.
You get on your knees, you realize you
don't have control.
You don't have control and you actually aren't up for all of this. And that itself is a kind of healing. I've many times in a journey, I've been humbled in that way, and my heart is opened. I felt a lot of gratitude, and I even understand it, but there you go.
Yeah, that's the key. And gratitude for us is always where we start. It's like the first place to honor yourself and to honor your protectors as well, the parts of you that are hardened, that have been driving for many hours in the road trip of your life, to say, hey, it's okay. Like, thank you so much for driving, but you've been driving for 40 years, so you can take a back seat and take a rest. And then let's let some of the vulnerable parts drive. Let's see what they have to say or where they want to take us.
I like that framing. I've been driving on the road trip of life.
Dr. Dave, thank you, buddy. It's been really fun to chat with you about it. And
before you go, though, can you tell us where people can find? We're going to have a link to the app, and hopefully people will have tried that out with us, but learn more about these wearables and the work that you do.
Yeah, you can go to apolloneuro.com to find Apollo or apollosessions.life if you want to find the mobile app specifically, or wearablehugs.com, which is what the kids call it. And if you want to find me, I'm on socials at Dr. David Rabin. I love to hear from you, so please reach out. I'm happy to stay in touch. And my personal website and clinic website is drdave.io.
Wonderful. We'll include all those links.
Nice, Dr. Dave. Well, we'll get you on again and talk psychedelics in more detail, because, of course, there's many different kinds of psychedelics, and we just really kind of reached the surface. Also, we could talk about microdosing. But, well, all right, buddy. You know you're a new dad.
Yeah. Got to talk about the new microdosing Bible that just came out. Jim Fadiman and Jordan Gruber's new book.
Do you like the book?
I haven't read it yet. I just got it.
Oh, nice. Cool.
We'll have to get those guys on to talk about it. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you try it out with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks and exclusives along the way, join us as a paid subscriber. Now, onto this week's adventure.